It is with very great pleasure that I introduce Dr. Robert Ballard.
Good afternoon. What I've tried to do in the last few hours that we've had, we got the slides about 15 minutes ago. We were up until 4 o'clock this morning making these slides. I want to thank National Geographic for providing their assistance to me. It's been an extremely difficult period trying to do what we've done in just the last few days, and then to come and run into what I'm running into at a time where I'm still trying to process my data and understand what I did out there. So the summary that I'm going to give you today is really my best understanding of the data as I see it at this time. There's at least 35% of the data I haven't even seen. Our machines were running up until the last minute, so I'm sure that no scientist in the world ever wants to have to go through this sort of instant analysis of what he did when he hasn't even analyzed what he did. So some of the artwork that I've worked up, I hold myself fully responsible for what will later be wrong about it once I have a chance to look at the data, but I hope that I'm the one that's able to point out that I was wrong. So with those introductory remarks, I'd like to begin. This is going to be a mixture of slides and video in an attempt to take you through the sequence of events that led up to the September 1 discovery of the RMS Titanic. So if I could have the lights off, please, so I can have the first slide. I'm not going to dwell on all of this, simply to show you the area of the Titanic and, more important, the scale. We constantly had to remind ourselves of the magnitude of this ship. And so in the main lab, we had a silhouette of the Titanic, and we placed the silhouettes of the other two ships. And we think the Nora is a pretty sizable ship, and when we put it up against the Titanic, we realized what we were faced with, and it's just the awesomeness of this vessel that just constantly came in on us as we worked. The area in which we were working is an area of the lower Continental Rise Hills, a very common terrain to most scientists working out of Woods Hole. It's an area of tremendous mass wasting and sedimentary movement off the Grand Banks. The Grand Banks are being swept by currents, and those sediments are pouring off the Grand Banks and down into a series of canyons. And sure enough, the Titanic area has a canyon running right down through it, and this did give us a great deal of trouble operationally because of the presence of this canyon. One of the problems that we had many years ago when we first contemplated going to the Titanic was concerns by the scientific community that this might be an area of what we call benthic boundary activity or bottom contour currents. And what this could be to us meant possibly bad news. It was possible that we could be in an area of benthic storms, and that these benthic storms would lead to high turbidity. And because of high turbidity, even if we found the Titanic, we wouldn't be able to photograph it very well, or we might even never find it with visual systems because we couldn't see the bottom due to this high turbidity. So several years ago, working with National Geographic, we went out on the Evergreen, the Ice Patrol, and lowered cameras, dropped them to the bottom to get an idea of whether we were just fooling ourselves to ever think we would ever get any images. We went out and we dropped this camera, and triggered on impact, began sequencing. This was done by Emery Christoph of National Geographic and Al Chandler of National Geographic. And what we quickly saw in this sequence, this one followed by the next one, as the cloud disperses, is that as you see, the cloud disperses in a fairly uniform way, and you're not seeing any current shearing, you're not seeing any ripple marks or any suggestion of turbidity problems. And based upon this simple test, we realized that we had a chance at photographing the Titanic or even finding it visually. Naturally, the most important thing when you ever conduct a search is to make sure you're looking in the right drawer. We've conducted search after search where we did 100% coverage only to discover we had not done our homework and we had been looking all the time in the wrong drawer. And so all of us dwelled. Jean-Louis Michel, my French colleague, became a scholar of high note on the Titanic, researched it thoroughly for over a year, and working with him and other data. This happens to be some of the summary work that Bill Ryan did in his earlier search attempts. But this is basically what you're always led back to is what data do you believe? And how does that data shape your thinking and creation of a search plan? Well, the big problem is the California. As you know, the California was steaming west ahead of the Titanic and encountered the ice at approximately 10:20. And at 10:20, it radioed back to the Titanic, which was about here, reporting that it had encountered ice and had stopped. And those of you that know the Titanic history know that the watch aboard the Titanic observed a ship about that time approaching the area and stopping. And that during the course of the night, while this ship drifted in a southeasterly direction, it observed all the distress flags, rockets, 8 of them, that were fired by the Titanic. And so the problem was that if you believe the California, it couldn't possibly have seen the Titanic at this distance. This is a roughly 10 to 12 miles distance to the detail that the observers observed it. Men from the engine room came up out of the California, could see the running lights of the Titanic and could see too much detail to permit us to believe that the Titanic could be where it was reported. So either we had to not believe the California, which were the only eyewitness we had to the disaster, throw out that data and believe the Titanic and the Carpathia. And that was our big problem, because if we believed the California, we would have a search area we would have never been able to cover. And so we had no other choice, because we realized the vested interest that the skipper of the California had by saying he was too far away. And so we had to assume that the California's data had been either altered, collected poorly, or something. We could not believe it. All we could believe about it is that it told us that during the night there was a southerly drift of approximately 1.1 knots, which we could believe. That's the only factor we believed out of the California. We did believe the California later when it came to the debris area, because everyone else said the same thing. So we rejected that. And now we had the Titanic. We had its last position, its dead reckoning, its estimated course and bearing, and speed to give it its official position. No one has ever believed the official position to be where the Titanic is. And the primary reason that no one has ever believed that is not because it's one concern is that speed is too great, but in addition to that, a major concern is that all witnesses are convinced that the Titanic was on the eastern side of this ice barrier. Subsequent sightings by the Frankfurt, the Mount Temple, and the other ships, the Burma that came over, all led us to believe that the Titanic had to be on the eastern side of the ice debris. So the data of most importance to us was the behavior of the Carpathia. It was the Carpathia that received the distress signal from the Titanic. It had been coming easterly, and we felt that because it was coming easterly and the Titanic was coming westerly, that major current effects would cancel, and that we could believe the Carpathia's DR and its position of DR when it came about and headed towards the Titanic. And if you'll notice, the Carpathia course, if you extrapolate it, it goes straight through and comes to the official position. So that skipper was a doggone good skipper. He's clearly the best seaman that we've ever researched. And that seaman was on course, and instead of crossing the ice barrier to the official position where everyone else was milling around finding nothing that morning, the Carpathia encountered the wreckage and the lifeboats in this area. So with that data, we began to constrain ourselves to putting it on the eastern side of the ice barrier, accepting a southeasterly current vector, believing the Titanic, believing the Carpathia, rejecting the California, leading us to a search area of approximately 12 to 15 miles on a side, and naturally right smack dab having a canyon running through it, which caused us a great deal of trouble. The first vessel on scene for this summer's operation was the French research vessel Les Sorrois, operated by Ifremer, which used to be Conexo. I've worked with Conexo now for 12 years, and have been co-chief scientist on many of their expeditions, starting with Project Famous in '73, and every year of my life since then, I've been on a French research vessel working with them in a very close collaborative way, and all the colleagues that were associated with this expedition are those colleagues that I've been with so many years. But the chief scientist on the Le-sur-Roi with me, and was really the chief scientist, the senior chief scientist on that trip, was Jean-Louis Michel. And Jean-Louis Michel had, like myself, a great love of technology, and had developed the SAR vehicle system, which is a beautiful, high-resolution side-scan system that, having spent a month at sea with, it's extremely competent system. I'm very impressed by what France and the Thomson CSF have built. We do not have a comparable system, and I was very keen on learning all I could learn about what they had done, because the SAR technology so complements mine, and mine complements theirs, that Jean-Louis and I had a vested interest in one another, knowing exactly what each was doing. And the spirit of cooperation is so strong between our laboratory and their laboratory in Toulon that it went extremely well. Basically, the SAR vehicle is a side-scan sonar system operating at 200 kilohertz, and through unique signal processing can greatly expand its swath width to 1 kilometer. 200 kilohertz is not a frequency that normally gives you a 1 kilometer swath width. But through their signal processing, they were able to do that. They use a dampening weight to get rid of the heaving action so that they have a very high quality signal coming back. Behind this, not shown, is a magnetometer. We wanted to be able to verify that any target that we saw with the SAR side-scan sonar could be ruled out if by the magnetometer. And that magnetometer saved us from looking at an incredible number of bogus targets. We were able to eliminate. In addition to that, we were concerned about the potential of burial of the Titanic, which I'll get into in a minute, and we had a sub-bottom profiling system that could actually penetrate into the bottom. If we picked up a magnetic signature, we could check for the wreckage buried beneath any possible landslides. This is to scale. Just to give you an idea, everyone always uses vertical exaggerations that give you a false impression. This is really what the area was, minus the canyon, but it gives you a swath width. That's the sonar and its swath width. It's mowing the lawn, as we call it, just going back and forth, mowing the lawn, and that's the Titanic to scale. Those are our transponders. Those are water depths, and that's the ship to scale, just to give you a feel for the tremendous depth that we were working in. Here's our ship, and way down here, 13,000 feet, is where we found the Titanic. This is the Le-sur-Roi. This is the SAR vehicle system on the fantail of the Le-sur-Roi. This is the launching of that system, and it was that system that we mowed the lawn for about 80% of the area that we had selected. And we encountered extremely heavy seas with the SAR. Not this picture. I think it was the only day we had a pretty picture. Was the first day out. After that, we went through gales, and commonly our common sea state was 35 to 40 knot winds and 12 to 13-foot seas, and it was a rather miserable period as we mowed that lawn. And this is why I must stress the cooperation of France. This ship performed tremendously, and their crew performed tremendously in much more adverse weather conditions than ours, and they deserve all the credit that they deserve for helping us in this joint way. The byproduct of that was the two major magnetic anomalies that we picked up with targets, potential Titanic objects, and bomb craters that we were interested in. We have a lot of experience with things falling to the bottom, and at those depths they commonly create craters, and we encountered a field of craters out on this flat area. And then this is the classic previously recorded propeller blade that we knew had been reported. We wanted to look at that. We wanted to look at these magnetic anomalies, and we wanted to look at these impact craters. This was our most interesting one because it looked like a foreign object, or a non-normal object had impacted into the bottom. And that's the official position once again. Now, the terrain, we had to deal with this, much more complex. This topographic map is so simple. In reality, this is a highly incised submarine canyon with numerous tributaries. And we had to go into all these tributaries trying to eliminate the Titanic. This took up a lot of time to get this canyon out of the way. The Titanic is not in the canyon. Second was we encountered up in this area a tremendous landslide. A landslide that was over 12 to 15 miles long and 3 to 5 miles wide, and we were very worried about this landslide because this area had been affected in 1928 after the Titanic had sunk. 14 years later was a massive landslide off to the west in Laurentian Fan, and had broken numerous transatlantic cables with calculations as much as 60 miles an hour of that landslide, and we were worried that if the Titanic was in this area, it could be buried. And so we mapped that landslide very precisely with the French system. The third thing was the encounter of sand dunes. It looked like the Sahara Desert on this side. It was incredible. I was really surprised at the tremendous amount of very large sand waves and benthic bed forms. So we basically had three terrains that we had to operate in with Argo, and we had to respond to each terrain accordingly. Our plan of attack varied from terrain. This is the Argo system. There's a few mistakes in here that we just didn't have time to catch, but basically the Argo is really an integrated vehicle system with the surface ship itself. Argo can operate on a lot of different ships, but it cannot do close order drill like we needed on any other ship than the Nore, which is a Navy ship at Woods Hole, and the Melville, which is its sister ship at Scripps. This ship is the greatest ship in the world as far as I'm concerned, in that it has these unusual egg beaters. If you saw the Nore come into Woods Hole, you saw it spin on its axis as it arrived. It's a tremendously high maneuverable ship, which permits us to hold ourselves in the wind and sea. We did get up to 40-knot winds, and the captain was able to hold the ship in the wind and sea and move laterally. Other ships would turn into the trough and have tremendous heaving on the vehicle. But because of this unique ship, we were able to control our direction, our maneuvering in any of 360 degrees with these cycloids. Beneath that was our tracking system, which was precisely positioning the vehicle, and then down the wire was our Argo vehicle or our Angus vehicle. We had two different vehicles, and we had different strategies that we had to conduct with the Titanic. One of the strategies, the initial strategy, was use of Argo, but then we came up with Angus. I'll get in a minute. Argo is really a fascinating vehicle system. It's sort of funny that it is taking on a mystique. It's basically a lot of commercial equipment, cameras and recorders and everything that we've integrated based upon our operational experience. There isn't a great deal of new technology in that sense. It's just the way we put it together and our field experience. Anyone can buy the camera. Anyone can buy almost all components of Argo off the shelf and build their own Argo if they want. The only thing that's unique is some of the software that we've done. It just comes from our experience that makes Argo such a neat tool. It's on a conducting wire. It has low light level sit cameras, and it's those low light level sit technology that gives us 200,000 ASA of sensitivity that permits us to fly at great altitudes. And it's that high sensitivity camera and the strobing techniques we use that provide us with an opportunity to be at very high altitude. And it's that high altitude that got us a chance to get into the wreckage and see what was going on. I know it's been very frustrating to the media that when we send these images ashore and you go, this is just terrible image. In our field, it's a revolutionary image. And give us some time with the signal processing and image processing, and we'll have better and better images as we go. This is the first time we've done such large area imagery. We apologize for the quality of the images, but that's just the way the state of the art is right now. And you remember Armstrong's land on the moon. It was black and white and pretty fuzzy and a lot of static. And that's where we are in the same phase of underwater exploration. Okay. If you could kill some lights, because this spotlight is just to show this slide for a second, unless people can see it. We had to, I guess if I can turn off the light here. No? This is the control van, operated in red light, as you know, that doesn't cause your eyes to dilate. And this is the control center. It's basically a video studio with all sorts of switching capabilities that permits us through microprocessors to talk to all our cameras. So this was Action Center. There's the side scan system that's looking. This is the database center, the control center. These are all the navigators here, the vehicle man's here, and out of here is the guy that's controlling the ship. If you have the lights back again. Okay, let me just check my notes very quickly. What I'd like to do is just show you a better quality copy now initially of the moment of discovery. Let me describe that. We had been mowing the lawn for several days, and it was rather boring. We were primarily in the area of the sand dunes, and we were going over sand dune after sand dune after sand dune. The watch fever had calmed somewhat, and the popcorn was being popped, and people were listening to music, and it was very low-key, relaxed environment. And then all of a sudden, into the sand waves and the sand dunes, we started to pick up debris. We had seen other debris, a lot of false target debris. Those boilers, by the way, we went in and we had eliminated the impact craters as glacial erratics. Big boulders had fallen out of icebergs and made those bomb craters. We eliminated the magnetic anomaly patterns as edge effects due to the canyon. We eliminated the propeller as a big outcrop of sedimentary rock in the landslide area. So we went and we eliminated every target that anyone had prior to going and from the French data. And after we had eliminated every target, we realized that the ball game had started all over again and that we had to now do our own search. And that's when we began mowing the lawn in the sand dune area, and it was in the sand dune area that we encountered the Titanic. So we had been sensitized to debris, but then all of a sudden we realized that this was man-made debris, and before anyone could do anything, this picture came into view. So if you would just cut all the lights, show this, and again, I apologize that this is not what you guys are used to showing on television, but it just happens to be the state of the art. Next slide. I mean the video, please. Okay, let me just recap some video for you, some new footage that the French have released to us. This is aboard the Le Sorrois. This is the SAR vehicle coming aboard, almost retrieving it like a manned submarine, like we retrieve Alvin on the A2. Big, heavy A-frame lift system, and then we're bringing it aboard. The big, heavy A-frame, nicely dampened and under control, and then brings it down, places his own cradle. When we treat it, it's treated like a manned submarine. Well, unfortunately, they did not. They ironically missed the Titanic by 300 yards. Now that we knew where it was. Next came the Nore. Look at the weather. We were blessed with incredible weather. No other group that gone out there was that lucky. We had about 10 days just like this. And we were able to really get a lot done before the weather set in. And unfortunately, the weather set in just as we found the Titanic. But look at that mill pond. We're installing our transponder nets to control our navigational activities. We used a series of nets. As we eliminated areas, we rolled our nets, retrieving the old nets, installing new nets, surveying. This is the Argo vehicle system going in. And from that, we did our initial discovery work. We're at the control center here. He's switching down. If you'll watch as he switches, you'll see images. He's able to talk to 3 different imaging systems down below. Then as we look at these different footages, there are 3 cameras. There's a forward-looking camera. You can tell it by this little tick. Here's our first image coming into the debris field. You notice our altitude is in meters. We're very high off the deck. We're scared to death of what we're coming into. We have absolutely no idea where the Titanic is right now, only that we're below the Titanic. And there's the big boiler coming in with its rivets, the 3 doors. There's all the rivets. I'll show you the classic picture of the boiler. But there's the doors in which they put the coal. And something just happened there that isn't on the original. Okay, stop. Let me go to the slide. But I mean, this is the boilers. We knew that everyone had reported that the boilers might have broken out of the bow. They were a target we were looking for, and it's the first thing we saw was this feature laid up on its end. And there's a man standing right there. Give you an idea how big these boilers. Size of this arrow back at that point is the man. Okay. Next, what we did was our strategy was as follows. Ironically, and this is really ironic, after we encountered the boilers, we immediately bailed out because we didn't know where the ship was. And the side scan sonar was showing debris all around us and much higher than the vehicle. And we didn't want to lose our vehicle on our first test and go back to the Navy and say, sorry about that. So we bailed out, got the vehicle out of the water, and we had been up at the extreme end of our net, and so we recovered the net and bracketed the Titanic with transponders. We wanted to have it locked solid in the middle of a net, totally under control. So we did that. We locked it in, surveyed it in, and then we began looking at the Titanic with side scan. Now here is, this is probably the funniest thing that came out of this whole trip. Here we applied this incredible amount of technology, the best the two countries could put together. We found the Titanic boilers. We retrieved this great technology. We began putting in a net, and the ship went over the Titanic with the echo sounder. We saw it on the echo sounder. I mean, it was just incredible. This 25-year-old sonar popped out, and here comes the Titanic right in the sonar. So we right away knew where the big body of the Titanic was. We knew where the boilers was visually, and then there was this massive object on our echo sounder. It's really sort of ironic that you could have done it with a fishing boat in that sense. We then began to approach the Titanic at range to see it. We wanted to see it off on the side with our side scans and be safe. And so we ran along the side, and we saw this massive wall that just blanked out our side scan. And we ran around it until we had it bracketed and got it locked into our coordinate system. And that was our initials. Where is this monster that is going to eat our equipment? And because we were worried about the stacks, the wires, the cables, the wreckage, everything, to go visual, we were going to have to enter inside that system of wreckage. And we had to get that under control. We got that under control. And the next thing we did, again, I know you all at that phase wanted all these beautiful videos, and we don't collect them. We're coming in very high altitude. We just want to make out that ship. And as a result, you see the following videos. If you could run that, and I'll just commentate as we went. So we went into the second phase. And the second phase was to go very high. Look at that. That's 15 meters. That's 45 feet above the deck. It's another 15 meters to the bottom. So the vehicle is over 45 to 50 meters off the deck, just coming in. This is where we came in real close, scared the dickens out of us. This now appears to be the stern area, which we finally located. Never got a pretty picture like, you know, in our still stuff. But this was now, we are 7 meters off the bottom. We're really moving in closer and closer. This is the bow with the flagpole at the very tip of the bow, and this to me was just an incredible picture. I know that you guys that want all of this quality, imagine, this is what hit the iceberg and hit the bottom of the ocean. There's a little flagpole, still survives. Again, we're just making out the bow, and the whole role of this phase was to case out the wreckage. Here's the bridge. Okay, we're going to get into higher quality stuff in a minute, but we're now figuring out this horizon is what we were worried about. This is the bridge line. You go from one deck level down to the next. Okay, and we needed to figure out those deck levels. So we were making runs with this high altitude guy. Here's the bow coming into view right here. You get some higher quality. There's that pen. We wanted to know the exact horizon of that deck. We needed to know exactly where the bridge was that stepped up to the next deck, because we wanted to send vehicles down onto this deck and not crash into the bridge and get entangled. And that was our biggest worry, was as we moved across here with our Angus system of hanging ourselves up on the bridge. So here's the bow. Here it is again. We just kept going over that again and again until we had that depth and altitude locked into the computer. And once we had all of the geometries of the Titanic locked into the computer, we could go after it in the third phase. And the third phase was to go in and get high quality color. And time was running out. We'd spent all our time mowing the lawn. We only had one day left. The world was going crazy. I think I spent more time on the radio than looking at the Titanic in the last 2 days. And that's why there's a lot of data I still haven't digested. But what we did with these initial lowerings, working the bow, we're working all up in this area here. If you could stop that just for a second and give me some light, I'll explain that strategy. We realized that the Titanic was sitting upright on the bottom in our first images. Excuse me, on this thing? Oh, okay. And what we were after is we wanted to know this horizon. I guess I'll stand here. We wanted to figure out the exact horizon of the bottom. We wanted to know this horizon and lock it into the computer. We wanted to know this horizon and lock it into the computer. We needed to know up to this horizon. And once we could get that, we could then move into the dangerous part. And the dangerous part was to now go from a vehicle that had eyes, Argo, to a vehicle that did not have eyes, Angus. Angus was operated on a trawl wire. You don't know what it's doing until you process the film a day later. And so we're now going to take another Navy vehicle down in and actually enter the wreck to get high color images. And this was the most scariest thing I've ever done in my life. We didn't know where this boom was. We didn't know what that boom was doing. We had lost this stack was gone. During this survey, we had ran Argo into that stack. And it scared the dickens out of me when we bounced Argo off that stack. Stack didn't do a thing. A little paint came off. We do have some Titanic paint on Argo. Now what's not shown here is the guy lines. And that was what was scaring us, were the guy lines, because we had to drop below stack level. Once we drop below stack level, we could put Argo right in the guy lines and lose it. So then we had to get in. And so we went down, and I had put a camera system in there that had a sound track. And I didn't know I was recording sound until we came back later, and we were reviewing it, and all of a sudden we could hear the sound, and normally there's no sound. And here's Argo coming in, and all of a sudden we hear it rubbing against all the guy lines. And you hear all the vehicle rubbing against real taut steel cables. And just before, and then you hear this big thump, and the vehicle bounces back as it goes into the stack. So after that experience, I said, we'll leave that to somebody else. We'll go work at the stern. We said we go back and approach this vehicle, the ship from the other end, but I was not going to go through that experience again because I saw on my side scan another stack. So I knew that 1 and 4 were gone, and I now knew that 2 and 3 were there, and I was just scared the dickens out of me. So forget that. We then began to do our photo mosaicing and color work on the last day. The first time we went in, we were real ginger, and that lowering was basically worthless. Well, it wasn't worthless. It taught us a lot, but it did not give us the high quality we wanted. And we now had 5 hours to go on the expedition. And so we went for broke with Angus and went in, and that was just the other day. Seems like it was yesterday. I think that's the last. Haven't slept since, so it's still one day, I guess. And we went after these images. And now what I want to show you is a sample of those images to give you an idea of what it looks like. And so if we could proceed and turn off the house lights, I'd like to now go through those images to give you an idea of the sample of this, and then we'll get into the stern issue. Okay, the first image, okay, let me back up on that. That's, okay, there we go. If you could give me the first image should be on video, I believe. Yes, if you could play video 2. Okay, stop for a second. Yeah, this was the final lowering. This is a new material, new video. I don't think anyone has seen this before. You just freeze frame that for a second. The final lowering of Argo just before we put Angus into the water was to confirm this horizon change. I wanted to photograph those cranes because they were so distinctive. And so I had to learn exactly where this wall was. So I brought Argo in, and what you're going to see here is Argo coming across the top of the bridge, right here. That's what that is, and I guess I got a light. Okay, that is pointing towards the bow, okay? The bow is to the upper left, so if you turn this guy all around, there's the bow to the upper left. This is the top of the bridge, right here. Argo's coming in this way, right past that davit, across the bridge, and these are the doors that they open up on the bridge for awnings. And that's what you're seeing. This is the center line of the ship. And now you're seeing stepping down these decks levels. And what you're going to end up in this particular run, this was my final check before I put the final vehicle in. And you're going to see us transiting across, seeing it step down. Then you see the vehicle go down, and on this lowering, just after that, I banged into the bridge with the vehicle. I dropped Argo down in here and hit the bridge. No damage done. It was a very light nudge. I only touched Titanic twice. Touched it here, and I touched it here. Okay, if you could kill all the lights in the house to help this projection, and then we'll walk our way down. Okay, if you'll run the video. Again, high altitude. We're coming. There's the bridge right here. There's the awning. I'm really getting close. 7 meters. You can see the heaving action. This was very scary because the vehicle comes up and down with the roll of the ship. I don't want to hit. I'm getting very close now. That's just a few feet away as it heaves down. You're picking up the lower deck. I'm coming down into the lower. I'm going telephoto right now just to panic to see what's going on. I have 3 cameras. I can jump to telephoto. That's where I am right now. I'm zooming in, trying to see this detail of the bridge. I'm zoomed back. I'm on the microprocessor. I go forward. It's my 3rd camera. Back down where you can see the tension going on just the way we're sequencing these cameras. There's the crane. We're picking up the crane. There's the starboard side up in the bow area. And we're memorizing all these numbers. We're writing, computer's eating up all these numbers to learn. I'm looking straight down now, right at that crane on the starboard side with the boom inboard. And now that's what I needed. I needed the flexure point right here. I needed those numbers at that flexure point. And as soon as I got those numbers at that flexure point, I had it. And then I got the heck out of there because I was scared to death at that moment. Okay, and this will just run. I'm heaving, I'm picking up, I'm kicking up dirt. Okay, stop for just a second. All right, we had the numbers now, and we could now go after the Titanic for just 4 hours and try to get those images. So what I'm going to do now is sequence you through the bow. I'm going to take you this way visually. Not all of the pictures. I've added some new pictures. I just got off the phone with France, and we agreed to add some more pictures. So we got everything. We had to coordinate all this. And so we've added some more pictures all through this area I think you'll find really interesting. And so if you will show those pictures. The new pictures are on slides, and the other ones are on video. So if we could run right off the top, I think the first one is a slide. Okay, that doesn't. All right, just stop here for a second. I think that's right. Okay, here's what our Argo data has shown us. The Titanic was up in this area. We knew a lot about this. We panicked on this, and we really learned in hindsight about the stern as we were coming home. We really hadn't had the stern wrapped up until we finally had some time to look at the data, and this was the debris field. And so I'm going to talk about the debris field, I'm going to talk about the stern, I'm going to talk about the bow. So initially I'm going to talk about the bow. If you could run that video, I think, if you could go with the first image, or do I have it? I guess I have it. Okay. This is the image of the bow right here. The railing, the bollards, the chain coming out, and a little flagpole right here. Okay? So that's what you're seeing, the detail of that. Then I zoom in. By the way, just to set so you can understand these images, I had 3 cameras on the other vehicle. I had 3 different lenses. I had a 16 millimeter lens, a 28 millimeter lens, and a 50 millimeter lens. And so I'm firing all those lenses at once. And so what you're going to see is a shot like this, and then boom, a high detail shot. And if you could show, I think the next image will be shot at about the same time with another lens. And if you could show that, please, on the video. Okay, boom. We have color transparencies of this that have been given and recognized. We've shot this on video, but you can see the tremendous detail that you get with those other lenses. And that's what we've got. There's the chain coming out. There's another one that we're off on the railing right now. It's broken. There's very little marine life, but here's a small fish, maybe 3 feet long, swimming quietly over the bow. This is the bollards. The the lines of the ship would come up and onto those bollards. That's with an O. And you can see the thin dusting of sediments. It's like a gentle snowstorm. This is now, I've added this. This is down into this area. This is where they're going into the cruise locker. This is that deck change right here, that step. This is the bow up here. You're now stepping down into this area, and there's the entrance to the cruise quarters. And fortunately, all the cables. See the cables? They're laying down because this mast fell over. Thank goodness. And it took with it all its cables. So this potential trap had been removed by the impact with the bottom, or on its way down, probably impact with the bottom. And I have a slide that takes us next. Okay, if you could kill the house lights, kill the spotlight just for a second so people can appreciate this slide. This is the boom almost bit me. I just missed the boom with Argo. So this is the boom. The bow is this way. That's that step where the cruise quarters are, into the cruise quarters. This is that number 2 hole. The hatch on the number 2 hole is open. Almost all the hatches are gone. This is the winch. This is the boom. And in this boom was the crow's nest. And then, if you could turn the house lights back on, and this boom had fallen over and smacked into the port side of the bridge. And you'll see this boom. We're taking a picture right about here. We're looking at that, looking forward. That's the bow. And we're now going to travel up in here and look at the cranes. I think I have those. There's the 2 cranes, okay? There's that number 2 hole. There's the boom. I'm stepping forward a little more. I'm looking at these 2 cranes. That's the port side crane, the starboard side crane inboard. There's the step I was worried about. I had to know where that guy was because as soon as I got there, I lifted the vehicle. Next slide. Oops, I guess I'm on the next slide. I started to bail out. Okay, here's another shot of that starboard side crane with the boom coming over from the port side crane. Okay, video again. Okay, now, if you could stop that, freeze frame that for a second. Thank you. And let me explain it. We're coming up into this area. This is from the port side of the bridge where the boom has hit and knocked that outboard. So that is actual damage done by the falling of the boom onto the port side of the bridge. Next slide. Go ahead, run it. Why don't you wrap it? You see the rivets in the deck. I mean, it's really nice to tail with a gentle snowstorm. Keep going. You could. Okay, stop. Let me explain that one. That's the number 1 stack. You're looking right down the hole of the number 1 stack. And all the damage, the ripping up around that stack. Okay, next slide. You can go ahead. So we're now stepping up. I made it up safely onto this level so I could get these images. And keep going. We're just freeze framing this. You have a color transparency, I believe, of this. A very high quality. Why don't you rapid advance to get this guy out of the way. Okay, stop. And we'll get it in a second if you could clean that up. We're right now on the starboard side, right up here, where the gymnasium, first class entrance. This is what was the skylight over the grand staircase into the grand ballroom, first class smoking. This is the most beautiful part of the Titanic is right in this area. And you'll notice that when we run it, this is the starboard side right here. This is where all of the lifeboats were. Okay, that's the little windlass right down in here, is tucked in there. Right in there. This is collapsed. This whole thing is caved in. And there's a big hole you can see right down the grand staircase. And so that's right in this area. And then that's about the time I bail out. I want to hit that stack. Okay, so run it. And this is the final image I took across because I didn't want to go past no man's land. And I bailed out after this shot, and was very happy, and did not want to do that again. No, I don't care how many pictures you guys want. I'm not going to do that again. The next time was with a manned submarine or something where I don't take on those stacks. Okay, like I say, all during this, we kept trying to move aft into the number 2 and number 3 stack area. We weren't going to do that, so we decided we'd go after the stern. Since we had the precise geometries of the vehicle locked in concrete, we decided to, we should know exactly where the stern was. So we came about, lowered Argo, crossed over the stern, and wasn't there. So there wasn't any stern. And so then we started biting into that, and then we started picking up very bad debris, and we said, forget that. And that was about the time we ran out of time. And we just couldn't figure out where the stern was. We ran out of time. We didn't want to go the other direction because it was too scary, and we came home, started home. And while we were coming home, the guys looking at the images started to realize that we had photographed the stern, that it was busted up, and we'd seen it in bits and pieces. And we'd seen it both near the stacks, but also down at the debris field. And the evidence we have for the stern, although it isn't, it isn't a stern that you can see. It's the pieces of the stern that we have specifically identified. So if I could have the stern artwork, I think that's me. Okay, if you could kill those house lights. So this is the stern artwork, and we were looking for the various components of the stern, the booms, different pieces, the ship's telegraph up here, and we began finding all of these pieces of a variety of places. So if I could, I think that guy is right on the stern. Let me back up. There's two guys that really are conclusive. That boom, that image next is a piece of a photograph taken looking aft from that deck. You see that boom, and you'll see a little telegraph. I'll show you that little telegraph right over there. See that guy right there? Little telegraph right there for communicating. And there's that boom. Now, there it is. There's that, it's eyeball that feature. And there's the base of that. I'm going to go back. This boom has been bent by collision, but just eyeball that area, go down, you'll see a lump there. I'll back up. That's that down there with that lump, and there's the boom. We'll go back to that again. There it is, that big square base, and then the boom that's broken off. Okay, another piece of evidence. There's the base of it. I mean, that's the base of that winch. And there's that telegraph sitting right there. So we had it. Not to the satisfaction or the to the technical ness that we had taken care of the bow, but we were convinced that we had done with that. But throughout the whole debris area, and just these final 2 concluding images for now, were the ones that struck me the most after looking at this ship and then beginning to see such delicate things as the dishes and other things on the bottom that had survived this catastrophic disaster and collision with the bottom. And then the ones that hit me the most were these wine bottles. All over the bottom in that particular area were many, many wine bottles. Like Dr. Steele said, that we hope that we can step out of this limelight and get back to work. The next major mission for Argo, in fact it's its first scientific mission, it's why I built the vehicle, is to conduct and continue my basic research on the East Pacific Rise and the mountains of the sea. And in December 3rd, Argo sails on its next cruise, which will be its first major scientific expedition to the East Pacific Rise. It's on the sister ship to NOAA, the Melville, from Scripps, and we'll be working from San Diego down off Mexico, and this will be the first time that I've ever had an opportunity, I'm really looking forward to this, to drive along the mountains of the sea and see them visually. This has been my dream for many, many years, to have this telepresence and to finally sit in comfort instead of squeezed inside a submarine and share with my colleagues the opportunity to see hundreds and hundreds of miles beneath the sea. And we hope to cover in just a very short time over 150 miles along the ridge and survey these hydrothermal vents that we've been seeing in bits and pieces and get back to science. Thank you very much.